When Maria first met Dmitri at the small cafe near her university, she never imagined that their chance encounter would lead to a marriage proposal within 3 months. But what she didn't know was that he wasn't looking for love at all. If you're curious about how a fake marriage turned into something real and the shocking consequences that followed, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because this story has more twists than you can imagine. And trust me, you'll want to stick around until the very end to hear how it all played out. Maria Santos was a 28-year-old immigration lawyer working in downtown Chicago, passionate about helping families navigate the complex world of visa applications and citizenship processes, and she had dedicated her entire career to understanding every nuance of immigration law after watching her own parents struggle through the system when they arrived from Mexico 20 years earlier. She was smart, successful, and fiercely independent, but despite her professional accomplishments, her personal life felt empty as she watched her friends get married and start families while she remained focused solely on her career. That Tuesday afternoon in October, she decided to treat herself to coffee at Cafe Luna, a quiet spot she'd discovered near Northwestern University, where she often went to review case files away from the chaos of her office. She was deep in concentration reviewing a particularly complex asylum case when a tall man with dark hair and striking blue eyes approached her table, speaking with what sounded like an Eastern European accent, as he politely asked if he could share her table, since the cafe was unusually crowded that day. Dmitry Volkov was 32 years old, originally from Belarus, and had been living in the United States on a student visa for the past 4 years while pursuing his PhD in engineering at Northwestern. But his visa was set to expire in 6 months, and despite his best efforts, he hadn't been able to secure a work visa through the companies he'd interviewed with. He was intelligent, charming, and had that mysterious quality that Maria found irresistibly attractive. And as they began talking that afternoon, she was drawn to his stories about growing up in Minsk, his passion for renewable energy research, and his dreams of making a difference in the world through his work in sustainable technology. What Maria didn't realize was that Dmitry had specifically chosen this cafe because he'd been observing her routine for weeks after learning from a mutual acquaintance at the university that she was an immigration lawyer. And his seemingly chance encounter was actually a carefully orchestrated plan to meet someone who could potentially help him with his visa situation. Over the next several weeks, Dmitry began appearing at the cafe regularly, always timing his visits to coincide with Maria's afternoon coffee breaks, and their conversations grew longer and more intimate as they discovered shared interests in classical music, foreign films, and weekend hiking trips along Lake Michigan. Maria found herself looking forward to these encounters more than she cared to admit, and for the first time in years, she began thinking about something other than work as she caught herself checking her appearance in the mirror before heading to the cafe each afternoon. Dmitry was playing his role perfectly, sharing just enough vulnerability about his uncertain future in America to gain her sympathy while carefully avoiding any direct mention of his visa problems, instead letting her naturally discover his situation through casual comments about how much he loved living in Chicago and how devastating it would be to have to return to Belarus, where the political situation made his research impossible. 3 months into their relationship, just as Maria was beginning to believe she had finally found someone special, Dmitry took her to their favorite restaurant overlooking the Chicago River and nervously proposed, presenting her with a modest but beautiful engagement ring and explaining that he couldn't imagine his life without her and wanted to build a future together in America. Maria was overwhelmed with emotion, saying yes immediately, and they began planning a small wedding ceremony for the following month, with Maria handling all the legal paperwork herself and ensuring that everything was properly documented for Dmitry's adjustment of status application. The wedding took place on a snowy Saturday in December at Chicago City Hall, with just a few close friends as witnesses, and Maria felt genuinely happy as she looked into Dmitry's eyes during their vows, believing that she had found her soulmate and that their love would overcome any obstacles they might face. What she didn't know was that Dmitry had been in contact with 2 other women during the same period, carefully evaluating which relationship would be most beneficial for his immigration needs, and he had chosen Maria not because of love, but because her profession made her the most valuable asset in securing his permanent residency. The first few months of their marriage seemed blissful as they settled into a routine of domestic life, with Dmitri helping around their apartment, cooking elaborate dinners featuring dishes from his homeland, and surprising Maria with thoughtful gifts that showed he'd been paying attention to her preferences and interests. Maria threw herself into preparing Dmitri's immigration paperwork with the same dedication she brought to her professional cases, ensuring every form was completed perfectly and every piece of supporting documentation was properly organized and submitted to USCIS well before the deadlines. She was proud to be helping the man she loved achieve his dreams of staying in America, and she often worked late into the evening at their kitchen table, reviewing immigration statutes and precedent cases to make sure she wasn't missing any opportunities to strengthen his application. Dmitri played the role of the grateful husband beautifully, expressing appreciation for her hard work and dedication, bringing her tea while she worked on his case, and reassuring her that their love would see them through any challenges the immigration process might present. But as the months passed and Dmitri's adjustment of status application moved through the system, Maria began noticing subtle changes in his behavior that made her question whether something was wrong in their relationship. He became less attentive, often staying late at the university for research that seemed to require more and more of his time, and when she tried to plan romantic weekends together, he frequently had excuses about important projects or meetings that couldn't be rescheduled. Maria initially attributed these changes to the stress of his academic work and the uncertainty of waiting for his immigration case to be approved, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the man who had once hung on her every word was now treating her more like a roommate than a wife. The turning point came 8 months after their marriage, when Maria decided to surprise Dmitri at the university with lunch, only to discover him having an intimate conversation with a young graduate student named Elena, and when she approached them, Dmitri's expression of panic and guilt told her everything she needed to know about what was really happening. That evening, Maria confronted Dmitri about what she had seen, and after hours of heated discussion, he finally broke down and confessed that their entire relationship had been a calculated plan to secure his immigration status, that he had never loved her, and that he had been seeing Elena for the past 3 months because she represented the life he actually wanted to live once his green card was approved. Maria felt as if her world had collapsed around her, realizing that every romantic moment they had shared, every intimate conversation, every expression of love, had been nothing more than an elaborate performance designed to manipulate her emotions and exploit her professional expertise. The betrayal cut even deeper when Dmitri revealed that he had researched her background extensively before their first meeting, learning about her family's immigration story and her dedication to helping others navigate the system, and had specifically targeted her because he knew her compassion and professional pride would make her the perfect mark for his scheme. Maria's first instinct was to report the marriage fraud to immigration authorities immediately. But as she sat in her office the next morning with the phone in her hand, she realized that exposing Dmitri would also implicate her in the fraud, potentially destroying her legal career and the reputation she had spent years building in the immigration law community. She was trapped in an impossible situation, torn between her desire for justice and her need to protect herself from the professional and legal consequences of being associated with a fraudulent marriage, even though she had been an unwitting victim of Dmitri's deception. For weeks, Maria struggled with depression and anger, unable to focus on her work and avoiding her friends and family who had celebrated her marriage and were now asking about her plans for the future with Dmitri. She moved out of their shared apartment and into a small studio closer to her office, but the emotional pain of the betrayal followed her everywhere, making it difficult to trust her own judgment and leaving her questioning every relationship and interaction in her life. Meanwhile, Dmitri continued his relationship with Elena while living in the apartment that Maria was paying for, apparently unconcerned about the emotional devastation he had caused or the legal risks he had created for both of them through his fraudulent scheme.
The situation became even more complicated when Maria received a notice from USCIS requesting additional documentation and scheduling an interview to verify the legitimacy of their marriage, a standard procedure that she now realized could expose the fraud and potentially result in criminal charges for both of them. Maria knew that she had to make a decision about whether to continue the charade to protect herself or to come clean about the deception and face whatever consequences might follow. And the weight of this choice was affecting every aspect of her life. She consulted with a criminal defense attorney who explained that marriage fraud could result in significant fines and up to 5 years in prison, and that even though she had been deceived, prosecutors might still view her as a willing participant if they couldn't prove her innocence beyond doubt. The attorney advised her to consider cooperating with immigration authorities as a victim of fraud, which might protect her from prosecution, but would definitely end Dimitri's chances of remaining in the United States legally. The situation became even more complicated when Maria received a notice from
USCIS requesting additional documentation and scheduling an interview to verify the legitimacy of their marriage, a standard procedure that she now realized could expose the fraud and potentially result in criminal charges for both of them. Maria knew that she had to make a decision about whether to continue the charade to protect herself or to come clean about the deception and face whatever consequences might follow, and the weight of this choice was affecting every aspect of her life. She consulted with a criminal defense attorney who explained that marriage fraud could result in significant fines and up to 5 years in prison, and that even though she had been deceived, prosecutors might still view her as a willing participant if they couldn't prove her innocence beyond doubt. The attorney advised her to consider cooperating with immigration authorities as a victim of fraud, which might protect her from prosecution, but would definitely end Dimitri's chances of remaining in the United States legally. As Maria wrestled with this decision, she discovered that she wasn't Dimitri's only victim when Elena contacted her after finding Maria's phone number in Dimitri's belongings and learning about their marriage. And during their emotional conversation, Elena revealed that Dimitri had been telling her that his marriage was purely for immigration purposes, and that he planned to divorce Maria as soon as his green card was approved. Elena was devastated to learn that she had unknowingly become involved with a married man and that Dimitri had been lying to both of them about his intentions and feelings. And she agreed to help Maria document the fraud by providing text messages and emails that clearly showed Dimitri's true motivations. Armed with this evidence, Maria finally found the courage to contact immigration authorities and report the fraudulent marriage, providing them with detailed documentation of how Dimitri had deceived her and exploited her professional position to further his immigration goals. The investigation moved quickly once officials realized they were dealing with a clear case of marriage fraud, and within weeks, Dimitri was arrested and his adjustment of status application was denied, with deportation proceedings initiated immediately. During the legal proceedings that followed, Maria testified about how Dimitri had manipulated her emotions and professional dedication to immigration law, and her cooperation with authorities helped establish that she had been a victim rather than a willing participant in the fraud. The case made headlines in the local legal community, with Maria's colleagues expressing support for her courage in coming forward, despite the personal and professional risks she faced by admitting her involvement in the fraudulent marriage. Dimitri was ultimately deported back to Belarus after serving 6 months in detention, and Elena, who had also been manipulated by his lies, provided victim impact statements that helped prosecutors understand the full scope of his deceptive behavior. For Maria, the resolution of the case brought both relief and continued emotional challenges as she worked to rebuild her life and restore her faith in relationships after being so thoroughly deceived by someone she had trusted completely. She underwent counseling to process the trauma of the betrayal and to develop better strategies for recognizing manipulative behavior in future relationships. And she eventually became an advocate for other victims of immigration fraud, using her experience to help law enforcement identify and prosecute similar schemes. The experience also made her a more effective immigration attorney, as she developed new procedures for vetting potential marriage-based immigration cases and became skilled at identifying red flags that might indicate fraudulent relationships. 3 years later, Maria had rebuilt her practice and her personal life, entering into a genuine relationship with a fellow attorney who appreciated her strength and resilience.
and she often spoke at conferences about immigration fraud and victim advocacy, turning her painful experience into a way to help others avoid similar situations. She never regretted her decision to report Dimitri's fraud, even though it had required her to admit her own mistakes and face public scrutiny about her personal life, because she knew that allowing him to succeed would have encouraged similar schemes and potentially harmed other innocent victims. The case served as a reminder that immigration fraud not only undermines the legal system, but also causes real emotional and psychological damage to the victims who are manipulated and exploited by individuals willing to fake love and marriage for personal gain. Maria's story ultimately became one of resilience and recovery, showing that even when trust is shattered and love is revealed to be fake, it's possible to rebuild and find genuine happiness while also using painful experiences to help protect others from similar harm.